All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, we are getting into the Gathering Storm for the first time. So we're on the prologue, and this is our first Sanderson written book, theoretically from the notes of Jordan. So we're told.
And there are parts on the first time I reread it, I felt like I could notice more, which were like whole sections that were mostly done by Jordan, because we know that he had written some sections, and the prologue seems that way to me. At least, some of it does. But you can tell how much I've reread this by how intact the spine is and that there are no pages falling out, unlike all my other books. Um, so that is. I would also note that just before we get started, we've had several good covers, and now we get this, whatever the hell this is. So,
Well, we complained about the last one with Perrin on it too.
yeah, that one at least looked good, except Perrin didn't look bad. He just that wasn't Perrin. That looks silly.
Hmm.
This actually looks bad. And I know I'm not one to talk because I have no artistic skill whatsoever. And I know even from people who can draw well, hands are really hard to do. But this looks like a child drew it.
Yeah. And the arm is kind of disproportionate to the body.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot going on that. I do have some artistic skill, and you can you don't freehand everything, especially when you're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
anatomical things. And he could have at least gridded something, knowing he's trying to put something together for the cover of one of the biggest books in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, there's a nice forward by Sanderson before you actually get to the book, which might go into later if we get more down the rabbit hole of Sanderson versus Jordan. Um, but the opening, where are you? Here we go. Um, the opening prophecy, though it's not a prophecy per se, it is interesting. Um, Ravens and crows, rats, mists and clouds, insects and corruption, strange events and odd occurrences, the ordinary twisted and strange, wonders. The dead are beginning to walk, and some see them, others do not. But more and more we all fear the night. These have been our days. They rain upon us beneath a dead sky, crushing us with their fury until as one we beg, let it begin. Journal of the Unknown Scholar, entry for the Feast of Freya 1000 in E, which I believe the new era is what they call the new.
Yeah, so that would have been about the time of the Trolloc Wars.
Yes, and so new era is what they started calling it after the breaking finally ended, and then I think they call it something else after the Trolloc Wars, and then something else after the Hundred Years' War. So that one makes me go, interesting. I wonder if that is just randomness or if that is supposed to be someone, um, that we're supposed to suss out maybe what that means. But then that gets right into it in the prologue, because the opening, um, I've complained before when he introduces characters when he could reuse characters we've already met,
Hmm.
but I don't mean these instances where he just gives us some rando with a short little vignette,
To
which
give us some meta picture.
exactly. You know, it's not like what I'll complain about here in a minute when we introduce a new character in the Black Tower that could have been someone we already met. Um, and that's an actual significant arc. This is just a little scene with some random person, and as always, he makes them feel real, and and thus gives you a sense of what's going on, uh, kind of in the I've used this as an analogy before. Uh, the Lovecraft didn't describe the monster. That's why if you look up Lovecraftian art, it's kind of all over the place because it's people's interpretation of what is going on. Lovecraft told you how the monster, how the unspeakable evil made the person who was seeing it feel, what it did to his psyche. And in a sense, that's what Jordan is doing here with it is the end of days, it's the apocalypse. How is that making people feel? How are they reacting? What's going on here? And so we start with some rando farmer uh up in the borderlands, right?
Somewhere near there, because the other guy
Yeah.
says he's from the borderlands, but he says it in a way that might be that he moved there.
Yeah, one of them did. I don't remember which way,
The
if it's the
the
guy's
the the
POV or the guy who
blacksmith,
shows up.
the blacksmith says I'm from the borderlands, but
Yeah.
so I'm
Okay.
assuming it's south of that.
Well, they're just getting this sense that they have to do something. And so how much of that is the pattern weaving, starting to weave more and more threads, and how much of that is just people looking up at the sky and going, "This ain't right, and we better do something about it." Um, there's this repeated sense in this little scene of the storm is coming, of him thinking the storm is coming, and then the last scene, the last line is the storm is coming, and he had to be ready. Um,
Well, and also the take into account that he was still gonna stay after the blacksmith left, but then the wife came out and asked what the
yes.
blacksmith's wife said. And so there's implication that she knows something about the wife that
Well, there's also after the wife comes out and she kind of there's this moment of pause and then she just basically says, "All right, well, let's get to it." And there's no discussion of, well, what's going on? Why did they do that? What were they thinking? What should we do? No, it's just we need to do. There's just this sense of, all right, well, we need to get stuff done. And then I kind of wish he would have done this more. There are a few times I think where this happens. Um, but then the next scene is we go back to Mr. Stumpy Hand here, but from one of the Soldam's points of view, which I
Mhm.
think is really cool to revisit that scene and see how it wrapped up, um, but not from Rand or Nynaeve's point of view.
Because you would have Nynaeve's opinion, and
Hmm.
Rand, he can't give too much of his thoughts right now because we're you get a better kind of the impact of his hardness and coldness is better through somebody else's eyes.
Hmm.
If you we were actually in his head, we would see the conflicting thoughts. They're like, I have to be hard. I have to be hard.
There's also you get this very odd sense of um, what in the world do the Sanshin think about the Dragon Reborn? Because
They have to have
there's this,
prophecies as well.
yeah, and she's terrified of him, but then also when Nynaeve comes in and starts being Nynaeve, um, the Soldam seems kind of shocked and a little bit turned off that Nynaeve is what is speaking to him as if he were a servant, not who he was. Not even having difficulty even thinking this is the Dragon Reborn. So there's some degree of he somehow fits into their hierarchy because it's scandalous that Nynaeve would talk to him this way.
Well, you would think at least he would be uh, maybe not as high as the Empress, but someone of the elite blood just by being the Dragon Reborn.
Hmm. Yeah.
I would
Um,
assume just by their hierarchy, because they treat the Empress like a goddess, it would be their relationship, probably their ideas of what the Dragon Reborn would be similar to Elida's idea of it. Yeah, he's needed, he's prophesied, he's all these things, but I'm going to control him.
Hmm.
He is going to be my weapon in this battle. And just like the Domine are weapons for the Shanshan themselves, so
Yeah,
would
that's a
he
good
be.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, then we bounce back to Tylee Kurgan,
Wait, I
Lieutenant
think I had
General
a
of the
comment
ever
about.
victorious Army.
Oh, go back to page 28 first with Rand, because I wanted to, because we were talking about not being in his head, but you get ideas of what's in his head
Hmm.
when when Nynaeve is berating him about this isn't right, you know it, sending the Domine back because they are essentially slaves, even though they're so far gone that the
Yeah.
Stockholm syndrome is like on steroids, is cranked to 11 with these. I mean, how can they not?
Yeah.
One thing the show actually did well was show the trying to break Egwene process.
Yeah.
And even though it did it well, it still didn't do it justice versus book two when we were in Egwene's head. So it's but she's like, it's not right, it's not right. And he comes out with a leader answer. Right was easy to find when all I had to care for was a few sheep. Nowadays, sometimes it's harder to come by.
Hmm.
And that's actually a real statement. Yeah, he's in this mode of I've got to be hard, I've got to be hard. But that's something Gareth Bryan would say. That's something, I'm not even going to do his last name, Renauld would do. That's something that all of these great leaders of the books would do. That's something Cadsuan would say.
Hmm.
Right's not easy. It was easy back when I just had a few sheep and we were supposed to get married in a small village and
It's interesting you bring up Cadson, and we'll have to keep an eye on her because of what's going to happen here through the books. But I'm trying to think if she ever has a moment of doubt after things kind of go to crap. Because she's not she's certainly not wrong in what she's trying to do with Rand, but I feel like it would have been more successful. It would have had a better chance at success if she would have recognized this because Rand's not a dummy. He recognizes this. What Cadsuan is trying to teach him is that it's going to be bad no matter what you do. Try and pick the least bad option and then keep moving forward. You can't dwell on it. You can learn from it, but you can't dwell on it. And that's what he's doing. We've talked about it ad nauseum. That's why he's so dark right now, is because he's dwelling on it.
Mhm.
He can't just see it, learn from it, and move on. Mourn, cry when you want to cry, cry when you need to cry, laugh when you need to laugh, and then move on because you got work to do. Um, and I don't feel like Cats whenever kind of acknowledges that and recognizes that he knows it. He just he doesn't know how to deal with it.
Mhm. Well, and he thinks he does. He thinks he is,
Yes, yes.
but he still keeps getting drawn back in that abyss. He keeps staring down in the abyss. He's a Nietzsche character right now.
Mm.
And the
Um,
last thing from this part of the before we move on to Tylee is we get insight in Rand's head there, but we also get insight into Shanshan culture a little bit, which is fun
yes.
because she's lamenting what might be her punishment as she's
Yes.
talking. And I think too many people confuse the Da Caval as something Grendel would have. An amusing pet that is a servant that's everybody's enjoying the nakedness. And, no, they do the nakedness in Shanshan culture because it's the ultimate shame. And the Da Caval are the lowest of the low. They are being shamed purposefully. To be naked like that is the worst thing that can happen to you in that culture.
That's a good point.
Look at a Jin, and she's or Leolwyn, I guess at this point, she's so prudish. Everybody in
Yeah,
the culture is
yeah.
so prudish, but we have these naked servants. They're so prudish that they can't enjoy the naked servants. It's a matter of fact that these people exist, but they're the ultimate in shame.
And she's so on page 30, she's trying to figure out how to explain this and not lose her life. There had to be a way she could present these matters in a way that would save her life. Um, she had given her word to the dragon to speak directly to the daughter of the High Moon, and she would, but she might not do so immediately. Careful consideration would have to be given. Very careful consideration. um, there's an I don't know if he was consciously doing this, but when you see normal Sanshin, there's an element of the Eastern Bloc here.
Hmm.
Um, especially if you read good old Germans, the Stasi, the East German secret police, were the most efficient. Good old German efficiency. And so especially if you read or listen to accounts from East Germans about how they had to live and about how everyone lived at least two lives. You lived the life you lived outside, and you lived the life you lived in your head. And there was always this fear because everything was political, everything was politics. Everyone had to be a political animal because we're just chatting, but I don't know what you're going to do with what I say. There's always that chance, no matter how good of friends I think we are, there's always that chance that you could go to the Stasi or you could be an informant of the Stasi. There's always that chance, and it made you have to be a political animal, even if you were just a street sweeper.
Hmm.
All right, then one of the cool late characters, General Kurgan of the ever victorious army. Um, we get. I like that this, of course, this follows from the Domine because which followed from, you know, from the blacksmith and the farmer who grew up here. They would have, at least some degree of understanding of the prophecies. They would have heard that the dragon was reborn and it's real this time, right? All this stuff that is going on. And now you have the Sanshin who we don't exactly know what their prophecies are, but it seems that they're not recognizing the end like everyone else is. They don't realize it's Ragnarok. They're confused.
Hmm.
There was an element of that to the Domine of trying to figure out how to come to terms with this is the dragon and what does that mean. But then here, um, even Perrin, who's not anyone's scholar, he recognized now he in his grumpy and practical way said there's nothing we can do about it, let's move on. But he recognizes that these were signs that we're living in the end times, which he already knew because he grew up with the, end times prophet. Um, but Kurgan here is legitimately confused. Like when she's thinking about her quartermaster having opened up travel rations and they've just completely turned to dust. And these are things designed to keep for potentially years, some of them, if they're stored properly. Um, and so then at the bottom of page 32, she has this thought, and she can't put it into terms like the farmer and his wife, they have this thought too, but their thought's a little more advanced, I would say. Their thought is we need to be doing something. We need to
Hmm.
go. We need to join this fight. Hers is just something was happening. Perrin hadn't been willing to speak of it much, but she saw a weight upon him. He knew much more than he had spoken. And then she thinks, we can't afford to be fighting these people, she thought. It was a rebellious thought, one she wouldn't speak to Mishima. So here we are back to the, it's almost like an Eastern Bloc authoritarian kind of culture
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. She's
that
she's she's worried about even a thought crime.
exactly.
Yeah.
So she's worried. She's recognizing she just had a thought crime, and even this guy who has been her trusted lieutenant, her trusted companion in battle for years, she won't even voice this thought to him, which tells you a lot, which is just as well because poor guy. Um,
Well, there's fun. This is where he was working on notes because either that or he really read the previous books because there was a conversation between Mishima and Perrin earlier,
mhm.
and realistically, Perrin was right,
I'd like to meet these Trollocs someday. No, you wouldn't.
but technically he never did. He said, "I would like to see these
Yeah,
Trollocs one day," and he never did. He was killed before he ever could.
because
And
as parents said, no, you wouldn't.
yeah.
Yeah, and you didn't. Um, and this just adds to her shock because she kind of um uh she reacts well because we know she's awesome. Um, he slid from his saddle and collapsed in a heap as something enormous charged through the underbrush beside Tylee, cracking gnarled branches, throwing itself at her. Um, and then her horse freaks the heck out. Um, because as we've been told, even Borderlander horses have to be trained quite a bit to not do this around Trollocs
Trollocs, yeah.
because they're so unnatural. Um, and even she thinks she launched herself at the man who had tried to kill her. He spun, snorting, and for the first time she saw just what it was. Not quite a man. Um, so
See, I wish he would have paid a little more attention to detail here because we could have had a kind of a crossover of cultures. The Trolloc would be too huge to be a man.
mhm,
No one would mistake it for a man just on pure size. You don't have to see the
mhm,
face yet. But the Shanshan fight with Ogier.
mhm.
And she could have said she launched herself at the Ogier ahead of her or
Yeah.
something. The gardener, the wetlander
The
gardener
the
or
the
whatever.
shock
Yeah.
that she was being attacked by an Ogier. Yeah, and
Yeah,
then oh
yeah.
wait.
Wait, that's not oh,
or
that's something
or
different.
the progression there because
Because it
even
wouldn't it wouldn't be shocking to see an Ogier in battle for her because they use them.
but I think we've seen this with wetlanders though as well, is that their first impression is that this is a man because it has to be. What else could it be? Wait, it's too big. It must be an Ogier. Wait, it's monstrous looking, you know. Um uh as an aside, I just watched, I've referenced this before, the Y Files. Apparently there's a relatively new book out that makes the case that Neanderthals weren't big four-headed humans. They were more like orcs.
I think technically they were a tiny bit smaller than Homo sapien.
Yes, but their
Yeah.
bone density and muscle
Was
structure
massive. Yeah, yeah.
was gorilla-like. Yeah. And part of the thought is that not finding leather working tools for Homo sapien of the area, we have found numerous evidence of tools and leather working. We have not found any for Neanderthal, so the thought is they had fur.
Hmm. Or they just used fur.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, but they actually the evidence from their cranial structures might be that they were a little bit more intelligent too, but they were less
Yeah.
social.
It is not a widely received book yet, but
Yeah.
it is interesting to think, maybe this is where the numerous stories of men like monsters
Hmm.
throughout so many
Well, we talked about it in
cultures.
our biblical episode. The what was it? Noah's part of
The
the story?
the yeah, it's at the flood where it references the Nephilim,
The
and we don't know
Nephilim.
what
Yes,
that
yes.
is. Yeah, that we just
With which
they're referred to as
Nephilim,
giants.
Neanderthal, over the course of several thousand years, you can see that word playing the telephone game
Mhm,
quite a bit. But yeah, they were stronger, they were more robust with their bone structure and probably a little bit smarter. And the theory is why Homo sapien took over the world and not them was that we're more social, and a coalition is going to kill one anytime.
mhm.
And so we were
Yeah.
able to to the what ultimately prevailed was because of the social nature.
Also, around the time they started to go extinct, there was a massive Krakatoa-like eruption in Italy that blanketed pretty much all of Europe and North Africa
Yeah,
in
but the
pyroclastic
Homo
form.
sapiens in that area lived for the
Yes,
most
because
part.
they were
So
able to adapt better than the
yeah,
Neanderthals were. Um, Back to the monsters.
yes. Sorry for the aside. Not sorry. That's
Um,
what we do here. We overanalyze everything and bring it
exactly.
into to the real world.
Um, I loved the way it ended, but also made me go, oh, because I did not expect to see her again. When the last thing we see from her scene is Ty Lee charged down the hillside bellowing for her honor guard as more of the beasts roared out from the trees behind her. Um, Maybe put a little bit of a pin in this because to me, this this reads more like it was mostly written by Jordan and just touched up by Sanderson.
Hmm.
And you see here what I think Sanderson might have been trying to do with Matt down the road, and something we've ranted about of is not a good scene because
Mm.
makes Matt look kind of dumb. She
Well,
doesn't
it
have a
makes
choice
it's
here.
completely out of character for Matt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a choice here. She is surrounded. They've been ambushed. They have somehow managed to take out her scouts without, sounding any alarm. And they're literally on top of her. She has no choice, but if I want to live and if I want to save my command, I need to lead the charge, literally, you know.
Well, but
And
you're
we've
in
seen
the battle already. You're
exactly
not putting yourself in the battle.
the
You're
battle
in the
came to
battle. Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And
Well, we see that would be in character for Matt because we know he killed Culloden.
yes, but the scene I was going to reference where we see this um is when the Shady Shido or Dark Friend Aiel, whoever they were that somebody teleported
Mm.
gated into his camp, and he, in order to save, I don't remember who it is, I think it's Talmanes, is walking up and he jumps out and starts
It
shouting
was
in order
either
to,
Talmanes or Nelson. I think it
yeah.
was Nelson
And so he jumps out and starts the
because he
fight
was drunk.
because he doesn't have a choice. He has to save his friend and his, one of his lieutenants. He had, but as soon as enough oppressive bodies joins around him of people rushing in to join the fight, he steps back
Hmm.
and says and has the thought of, a general who leads from the front isn't a general for very long, or in Matt's own words, a guy could get killed in there. So he joins the fight because he doesn't have a choice. He starts the fight actually because he doesn't have a choice. Same thing here. But then I would expect that once the battle has been, once the line has been, solidified, she's the kind of general who's going to step back and take a look at the big picture because that's what her job is. The frontline soldiers fight on the front line. She's supposed to fight. So just a thought for later.
Well, and then we'll finish out
Um,
with her almost final thought before she charges. How did this happen? How had these things gotten so close to Ibudar? So something we've talked about it as a previous mystery.
mhm.
It's no mystery that we cut scene to Grindel. She was suspect number one for transporting
Yeah,
the Trollocs through the ways.
yeah, and we talked about this when Rand got attacked, got ambushed there at the farmhouse.
Mhm.
Of, and we had just seen
Well, we talked about it
Moradin
before
saying
that because someone was saying, someone's
yes,
moving a lot of Trollocs through the ways. Yeah.
because at the yeah, it was literally I think right before that because I think it was the prologue or the first chapter there, and it's Moradin with a little Forsaken tea party, and he's annoyed first of all that somebody is moving Trollocs through the ways, and that secondly he doesn't know who it was or where they went or why they're doing it. And the suspicion is that it is Samael is still alive. We know he's not, but that's one of their suspicions, or that someone is masquerading as Samael because only a Forsaken could have done this.
Well, this goes back to the Jordan books too, because I'm wondering if he had been trying to save something for later and it never materialized before he passed, and Sanderson never picked up on it, or he just fumbled that one. he very much left it open that there could be a mystery that Samael could be alive because there's just a shape of a man being eaten up by Mashadar. Well, we know Shadar Logo plays tricks on a lot of people.
Well, I think, and because he did eventually come out and say he's toast, that I believe those
Yeah,
were
yeah,
his exact words.
he had to say it,
Yeah,
which as a writer you shouldn't have to say
but
something like that.
but
But
I think he just wanted to clarify. Maybe he
that
was
this should
getting
have been
soft
more
in his old
clear
age.
than it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
maybe I thought it was more clear, and I realized this wasn't.
I think what he was going for there was, yeah, you're sure he's dead, but he did want that kernel of doubt because he was going to use Grendel to start. So he was going to bring up this somebody is impersonating Samael.
Mm,
Somebody is giving orders pretending to be Samael or giving the impression that it's Samael. And he was kind of laying a little breadcrumb of, remember, Grendel was involved in a quasi little conspiracy with them. They had created their own little partnership, and now that he's gone, what is she going to do with that? So he wanted to plant that breadcrumb, but then also have a red herring that you the reader were supposed to see through.
hmm
That not everyone else isn't going to see through it because they weren't there. They didn't see what we saw with Mashadar and Samael, but I think he wanted the reader to actually see through this red herring, unlike others where he's purposely trying to obscure things. I think this was a red herring, but it was a red herring that was intended to be seen through by the reader to basically let him let him have Grendel doing stuff, let you know that Grendel is up to something without taking the time to have a scene with Grendel.
mm.
All right, and then you get her here, which, as you say, is um not an accident that as uh Tylee is thinking here, what she gives you some geography here. It's not just that they're so close, it's only a day's march from the capital. That means they're way inside Altara,
hmm
right? So um it makes me wonder, is Grendel still playing her own game here, or is it now finally time to start letting the Lord of Chaos rule? Right? What was this attack part of her just playing her own game, or is she now actually doing, the big plan, the big picture?
Well, there's another wrinkle to add into that. She makes comment in this section in her head about Morden's obsession with
Hmm.
killing the other two, and if she knew that Perrin was with Tylee, maybe she thought this was an ambush on Perrin's life.
Mm, it's a good point.
But
Yeah, that makes a
also,
lot of sense.
yeah, but also it might not be her because she talks about Sindane and Mohidian doing their thing, rallying dark friends and everything, and occasionally making an attempt on Perrin and Matt. And so this could have been one of the attempts on by them too.
Mm,
But
mm.
I think she still is the most likely to be the culprit here because of the ways. But
Yeah, because of the proximity,
well,
and I and
but
I
also remember the Sean Shannon threatening where she's at too.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
They're threatening her. They're threatening her home base, which would be annoying to her.
hmm
And because she doesn't want to have to do extra work, is
Yeah, and if she
basically what
can
it
keep them
boils down
busy,
to.
if she can keep them busy down south, then she'll have a better,
Well,
better stronghold where she's
I
at.
also wonder. I also wonder if she knows where Suroth is. I think she does, either know or suspect, and so she may be trying to undermine Suroth every bit as much as she's, trying to, weave her own plans.
You mean
Because
Simmerage?
Simmerhosh,
Yeah, yeah.
brain names, the name meme. We could use the name meme for pretty much every episode.
Well, that one's far enough. I
That was
think
far
that one
enough. I'm
is.
just old and
Yeah.
forgetful. Well, it was because the scene before, the Domine was thinking about how is she going to explain this to Suroth, who isn't a problem for her, luckily for her. Um, but not Domine, the Soldom. Anyway, uh, but I down at the bottom of page 34, um, is this Jordan being a little too on the nose here, or maybe Sanderson making commentary about Jordan. Um, was Morgan trying to tempt her by sending his very most pretty, or was the choice coincidental? No, among the chosen
Wait,
there were
are you
no
soft cover or hard?
coincidences. Hard. I'm hard.
You said 34?
Bottom of page 34.
Uh, oh, okay, I found it. It wasn't the start of
Yeah.
a paragraph. That's okay.
Yeah. So it's this is the last paragraph, and then I noticed, oh wait, it up in the end
It's
of the
one
previous
sentence
paragraph is
above the last paragraph. Yeah.
yeah, is where it starts, is where she's taking a look at this pretty young man and thinking, I'd like to have him for my collection. And is that what Morden was thinking, or was it just a coincidence? No, among the chosen there were no coincidences. Um, I'm wondering if that's just another little poke, another little added clue of what's going on here, or if Sanderson wrote that, if he's making commentary on Jordan, because as he says in the forward, he first started in 1990 with Eye of the World as a teenager, and he'd been obsessed with it ever since, and it's you know literally one of the main factors that led to him becoming a published author. Um, and so he had obsessed about it and debated and talked with fellow nerds over what does this mean and what's going on here. So you know he he would have had the uh he would have had all the same conversations we've had of,
Mhm.
did he do this on purpose? Does this connect to this? Am I just seeing things here, or does that connect over there?
Yeah. Second floor lounge, Parker Hall.
Hmm.
Bunch of nerds sitting in a circle, talking about Wheel of Time, every once in a while interrupting it with a game of foosball.
um the other thing I like about this chapter, that I like whenever we get the Forsaken, is how casually they use the power just for quality of life stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, because
Just to
she
give you
basically air conditions herself. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
just to give you just an extra added hint of just this extra tiny little glimpse of, they were called the Age of Legends for a reason, because as far as we're concerned, it was all magic, and which is just random thought that I hadn't thought about before. I can't remember who said a significantly advanced civilization will seem like magic to an undeveloped a civilization. And it's funny because they are using magic, but in Jordan's mind, it's not actually magic. It's just a different way of manipulating physics.
Hmm.
Because that's really all it is you are manipulating the energy of the universe, and you're able to do it with your mind rather than with a machine.
Well, I mean,
So,
go back to 1995 and you 15-year-old, 16-year-old us, and someone said this is a real thing. And they showed us everything it could do.
I mean, that's a Star Trek tricorder right there, right?
Even
It's
better,
it,
Tricorder
yeah,
just did communication. This can look up cats on the internet, and
you can't watch porn on a tricorder, or can you?
or can you? That's why the red shirts keep dying.
Mystery solved. um,
Someone did a Twitter thing that was, what's the biggest lie you've been told in your life? And I had to post on there that you teacher said you wouldn't have a calculator in your pocket at all times.
that's a little bit mean because we actually like math.
Yeah, but we
Why
can
do
do
I
more
have to
advanced
learn
math
this?
if you have a calculator in your pocket at all times.
Hmm. Um, all right, yeah. So here we are, the what you'd mentioned about Sinegan and Malkidian seeming to do their own thing as well. Um, down at the bottom of page 36, she was certain Samael had fallen to Randalthor during the struggle for Ilion. And again, I think that's another clue of the fact that she's certain, not that she was mostly certain or almost certain. She's certain. and I think she's
Well,
certain because she's
except it's
been.
paired with her uncertainty with Demandred. So she's being shown as fallible, even though she's certain about something. And again, no coincidences here. I think we're supposed to still be uncertain because she's
Mhm.
uncertainly certain.
Well, but I think it's showing that. Well, I think it's a bit of putting a spotlight on the mystery of Demandred, but then also the fact that she is uncertain about Demandred, I think reinforces that no, I have figured these things out. I do know what's going on here. Um, and we know that she's right. In fact, now that Grendel had a clue that Simmerhodge had been pulling the strings with the Sanchin, she was confident she knew the plans of every one of the other seven remaining chosen, except Demandred. Um, I find it interesting that she'd have traded all her knowledge of Masana's and Arangar's doings for even a hint of Demandred's plans.
Which gives you insight of who she thinks are the most useless
Mm-hmm.
because she didn't name all the others. She just named those two.
And I wonder how much of it is what they had been doing. Because to me, that's interesting because those are the two that are
The
taking
most
care of the
responsible, the tower. Yeah.
taking care of the tower. So for whatever reason, Grendel doesn't really care about the tower. She would much rather know what Demandred is doing, or how much of that is that she sees him as the greatest potential threat to her being managing to somehow get rid of Morden and become Niblis.
Maybe they're equalizing forces because they're on both sides of that conflict,
Yeah.
which makes you wonder if there's an underlying, which would be just par for the course for the Dark One, to have Masana against Arangar as, hey, winner takes all here. Whoever wins is going to have the higher place. You influence your side, and
Uh Still, fool or not, he was extremely dangerous, and Grendel did not like being ignorant of his plans. So, I mean, it seems to me that's as much an answer as anything is she sees him as the most dangerous, especially if she doesn't know what he's up to, and she doesn't like that. Um, and then we get a little bit of a hint of where is he? You know, he Demandred liked having armies to command, but there were none left moving in the world. That is a very obscure hint, annoyingly so. And this is another one of the times one of our nits that we pick at is the mystery of Demandred and how it was really kind of unsatisfying. And I think a big part of that is because there were so few clues, it was nigh impossible to figure it out. You
mhm.
could guess, but it really was a guess of where he is and what he's doing. So that when he shows up, it's it's not as impactful. There are elements there that we'll talk about when we actually see it. There are elements there that I can see how this was supposed to be grand, but to me it was just kind of, oh, okay.
Well, and the problem with that is it showed up and it was all made possible by a certain culture.
Hmm.
And because it was supposed to be such a surprise, we get this random, completely different culture with no backdrop.
Hmm.
The Aiel we get fleshed out. The Shanshan we're getting more and more fleshed out. You know, we get the all the different not wetlander. Well, that's what the Aiel will say, but all the different Randland cultures kind of fleshed out. Some more than others, obviously. Like you don't get a whole lot of, like Candor unless you read New Spring, right? You don't almost get any of Arafel, but you still get some fleshing out of all the different cultures within. You don't get any of that from uh, I can't say anymore because it would be spoilers, but actually just
Yeah.
having this conversation is a spoiler.
Um,
But
page 30.
oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna say she it does put in there I think the herring he's trying to throw you on the Borderlanders.
Hmm.
Oh, it's got to be the Borderlanders. It's the only thing left. That's the only thing
Which
left.
exactly, which I think is him giving us a clear it's not the Borderlanders
Hmm.
because Grendel is thinking about it so directly, and because we have seen kind of what's going on there. So I think that's him being about as clear as Jordan usually gets.
Oh,
Page 38 is interesting to me, especially keeping in mind, put a pin in it for when stuff happens with Simmerhaj later. Um, Masana's insistence here and how emotional she is about rescuing Simmerhaj, and the admittance that she doesn't have the resources to do it, that they need Moradin's help to do it. Um, we do not have the resources to help her ourselves. She is bound to be well guarded by Aes Sedai and those Ashaman. You need to help us free her. Uh,
sorry, I'm writing something down for spoilers because there is something you're supposed to think Demandrin is right here.
it didn't dawn on me until the second or third time I reread these. They don't have the resource. I'd forgotten that the Dark One has restricted the use of the true power. And I suspect that's because his power is finite. That if he was letting them draw on his power, he wouldn't be able to do as much to influence the world and corrupt it as he is. And it suddenly dawned on me, oh, wait, they don't have the resources. Why? Well, she says they're going to be closely guarded by Aes Sedai and Ashaman. So if they went in there, they would have to go in there guns blazing. And they don't want to do that right now because you're not supposed to kill Rand. You don't want to kill too many of the people with him. You don't want to, upset him and turn his focus away from what we're trying to get him to do. So they need Morden because Morden's the only one with free access to the true power right now.
Hmm.
And that didn't occur to me the first time.
Or they need Grendel and or Moghedien, someone who's better at planning.
Um,
A little bit more of a slippery snake.
but this is what's interesting to me then is Samir Haj deserves her imprisonment, Morden said. Um, so added interestingness of Grendel didn't know this, so this is news to Grendel that she's been captured. Um, but think of what she'll reveal. Beyond that, she is chosen. It is our duty to aid her. Um, she disobeyed. She was not to try to kill Althor Mordenhead. She didn't intend to. Our woman there thinks that the bolt of fire was a reaction of surprise, not an intention to kill. Um, and as Grendel is thinking here as well, and not just that, she's one of us. It's specifically she's part of my little triumvirate here, and I don't want to lose that power. Interestingly, the Mandarin doesn't care.
Hmm.
You know, uh, his voice was his voice deep, his expression dark as always. Simmerhaj knows. I want Luce there, and Simmerhaj knows that. She also knows that if she'd killed him,
Hello, hello. Think we lost you for a second.
not just could she have
We
accidentally killed him, or maybe personally killed him because she was trying to save her own skin.
hold
Um,
on, hold on. My internet just dropped all of a sudden. Why the heck?
all right, weird little hiccup there. Not sure if it cut me off, but we're moving on. Um, another little hint that we get. uh, Morden is asking everyone about their about their preparations and what is going on. And Demandrid says simply, "My rule is secure. I gather for war. We will be ready." Um,
Which still could be
Masana's,
several things.
yep, but it does lend itself to Grendel's supposition that he's got to be somewhere. He wants armies. He wants to lead armies. He's got to be somewhere where he can uh, rule and gather an army. Masana's claim, actually, I should back up, is interesting because of is this arrogance? Is this boldness? Is this desperation? Because remember, she is now, you know, she was punished by um oh, I'm brain farting on the name of the creepy murderer, the hand,
Shadar Heron.
Shidar Heron. Um, yeah, so she was punished by him. So is part of this desperation to get back in the great Lord's good graces. Uh, I am perfectly poised. The White Tower and those fools who rule it will shortly be mine. I will deliver not just a broken White Tower to our great Lord, but an entire brood of channelers who, one way or another, will serve our cause in the last battle. This time, the Aes Sedai will fight for us. Not exactly sure how she plans on doing that. Um, it also seems to me that
Well,
much like Elida,
there's a signal error, and this isn't a spoiler because we've already seen this from Elida's point of view. Uh, Masana is working through Alviarin, and Alviarin is supposed to be controlling Elida. But remember, Alviarin started working against Masana. So there's your signal error. I don't know how she's going to do this. Well, she thinks she has a hold of Elida, but
that's a good point.
Alviarin is kind of the monkey wrench in this whole system that she thinks she has going. Let's try to kind of power through because I'm keep getting the internet unstable. This is
Bugger.
not a good look for you. You're lucky we don't have a good audience, AT&T. If we, if we were like Carlson or Rogan or somebody with millions of people, you'd be losing millions of customers right now.
Um, all right. Well, then we end with Moradin dismissing everybody except Grendel, and I find this interesting. So this is the top of page 41. Did you glean much from what you heard, Grendel? Um, so he let her hear what was going on. He questioned them in front of her, kind of as a reward of here's some more information to add to your collection because Malkavian is known as the spider, but you are also a master planner, and you execute those plans better than Malkavian does. The Great Lord approves. Um, yeah, I gave you leave to listen to the other two as a reward. Niblis has been chosen, but there will be other positions of high glory in the Great Lord's reign. Blah 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 blah. Um, uh, and then his command to her is Althor moves for Ered Doman. Um, he is to live unharmed until he can face me at the last day, but must not be allowed to make peace in your lands. So whether they know anything about prophecies or his answers through the door, or if this is just common sense of divide and conquer, they know what he's trying to do in forging peace, and they don't want it. They want nothing to do with it. Um,
Now, was he talking about
let's see.
forging peace between Ered Doman and Taraban or between the Shanshan?
Well, specifically, well, I think it must be both because he's going to Eredoman to try and both end the civil war there, but also get Rodel Iturralde to stop his campaign against the Sanshin. So it's both. He wants the conflict with the Sanshin to continue. He also wants the internal politics of Ranland to continue to be messy,
And we ship to
especially
that
since
land.
that mess. Yep.
Yes.
Especially since that mess is keeping one of the five great captains busy, or
Hmm.
four now because Pedro Dial was one of the five. Um, let's see.
So when we start with Rodell, just an interesting thing from real life. He talks about uh, things always have to be worse before they can get better. When she pulls his festering tooth, there was interesting thing. Michael Easter, he's the author of Comfort Crisis, posted the other day, and it made me think of it. It was number is 470. That's how many 15th century Londoners died of cause of death listed as teeth.
uh, um, it's a great little short scene, you know, reminding us what's going on here. Um,
Well,
uh,
and it's a short scene that does a lot to because this guy's going to be very important,
mhm.
and you get people talking about him later. It's telling. This is you. This is Jordan and Sanderson showing how badass this dude is
Yeah,
before we get to a bigger whole sequence where you have to have this backdrop to even be interested in the sequence.
and you just brought up signal error. Um, so one of the reasons there are conspiracy theories that say um uh FDR knew Pearl Harbor was going to happen and let it happen as an excuse to get into war is because in hindsight, uh there were all of these clues in what were called the magic intercepts. The before the war, the US had completely broken the diplomatic code of Japan. So everything that was going to and from their embassies, they were reading sometimes before the Japanese were because they could decode it faster because they had better equipment. Well, the problem was because there was no smoking gun in those clues, they assumed everything was fine. They ignored other clues, other intelligence from outside of those intercepts. You know, the uh, if you've seen the movie Midway, which I know people blamed out, which I thought was phenomenal, especially if you know the history of that area, and it shined a light on some people you've probably never heard of. Like I have one of them. I have his book up there of the intelligence chief. They were concerned because the Japanese carriers had completely disappeared. And they knew that was a prelude to an attack based on previous, the way Japan had previously acted. So they were concerned. Now they weren't thinking Pearl Harbor; they were thinking like the Philippines or something. But there was nothing in these magic intercepts, so everything's fine. And Rodell makes the same comment of your scouts are so good that you assume if they don't see anything, there's nothing there. No, that just means they didn't see anything.
Well, but no, he gave them something to see because it makes the comment that they're not wearing their
That's a good point.
stuff, and so what they did is they gave their uniforms to the farmers, sent the farmers marching one direction, and then now they're in the farmers' clothes in the fields.
We showed you what we wanted to see, and because you saw it with your magical scouts, it is what it is. There
Mhm.
was never a thought of, well, is this accurate? Well, no, the scouts on the rock end saw it, so yeah, here we are. And knowing that they so relied on that, he was able to set up a perfect trap. Um,
This is one of the instances, though, that I think the numbers start getting too big. I mean, we see what one Aes Sedai can do or one Domine can do, and there's 100 here. and he's got what would be the equivalent of all the farmers in the area and then some villagers worth of
Hmm.
soldiers. That, yeah, you got the surprise, but even if you do a volley, you're going to
Yeah,
get half of them. And so now
e e
you've got
exactly.
50.
So I'm trying to remember if we see the aftermath of this fight and if there's any thoughts on the casualties, because even with surprise, the odds of taking all of the Domine or Soldam out in one shot, they're going to get their own shots off, and their shots are far more devastating than yours.
Hmm.
So still an issue. Speaking of issues, I I like that we finally at the end get a POV from the prophet.
Yeah, and I didn't like it.
I did.
No,
I
because
did.
because there's raving mad, and then there's I'm a cult leader.
Mhm.
And he this is, I think, where Sanderson got it wrong because he did a Peyton Fane kind of mad.
I This one reads different to me than the others in the prologue. I think Sanderson had more to do with this section than the others,
Hmm.
just because the tone seems different. So I do think there's some more Sanderson here than Jordan, but there are elements here that I think are in keeping with what Jordan probably had in his notes that I do like. That the scene overall maybe isn't quite as good as I would like, but for instance, just the opening words, the prophet.
Oh, because he's
He
thinking of
think that's how he
himself. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's how he hears himself. There's this great the Batman animated series is a phenomenal piece of television, and and Batman Beyond was really a true sequel to it because it used the same voice actors and a lot of the same writers. And uh there's this episode where somebody is trying to uh drive Bruce Wayne insane, and he eventually realizes that it's an outside force because he kept calling himself Bruce. Because Bruce Wayne is insane.
Hmm.
He's literally nuts. The reason the character is so interesting is because uh Bruce Wayne is the alter ego, not Batman. Batman is who he became when his parents were killed. He thinks of himself. That's how he thinks of himself in his own head. That to illustrate just how over the edge he is. Now he obviously does it in a very different way. He's maintained control. In fact, his insanity made his control tighter, whereas Massima's insanity just made him chaotic,
See, I
really.
don't agree because from other people's points of view, he always was a measured insane. Look at his interactions
Great Hunt.
in The Great Hunt. Look at his actions in when Nynaeve and Elaine are in Gehenna, I think, where Galad and the Prophet's people try to get him a boat at the same time. He was always calm and measured, and he was like the enlightened priest,
Well, no, but he can snap. He'll start raving.
but that's not his ultimate insight. This would now what we do get here though is where it comes from because the dragon had appeared to him the night before the attack. We've got another Forsaken at work here. And this is one of the Forsaken trying to kill Matt and
Well,
Perrin because ordered
maybe
him to have the assassination.
it could be Mog Gideon messing with his dreams, which we know
I
she
would say
does.
more Sindane.
Or Sindane.
Yeah.
Um, or it could be a dark friend. It made me wonder, was this the first time the dragon appeared to him? Have they been messing with him this whole time? Um, I wouldn't think that he was a long-term plan, but it makes me think that when the prophet started proclaiming for the dragon, because we first hear about that I think it's the Dragon Reborn.
Well, it would make things make a lot more sense because this Shinaran guy who calls himself the Prophet building an army would have to be the most charismatic. It would have started slower and
Hmm.
it would have grown slower and then exploded at some point. But it exploded right away. So now that we include a Forsaken or somebody very powerful there, maybe Moghedian because uh
She was in
Sindane would
that
have been
area.
Lanfear or Lanfear trying to help Rand out, right?
Yeah.
You know, so it could have been the same. It could have been Sindane as well. One of the two, or even Grendel because she uses charm. You know,
Well, and Grendel had set herself up in that area and needed chaos in that general
but that
region.
would take away from Grendel being the one to have the Trollocs attack Tylee because the only reason that for that to be Grendel was she thought Ibera was with them. But either way, whatever it is, it makes more sense of the explosion of the Dragonsworn because then they could have had the Dark Friends in the area pump it up at the
Hmm.
same time. I mean, it's just like
Yeah.
the internet explosions over whatever topic.
Yeah.
There's
You know,
always a setup for it.
add, add get in his head to add to his fervor, but then also plant some seeds because it makes me think this is where some of the almost children of the light kind of elements of his rule, for lack of a better word, makes me wonder if that's where some of that came from to add to the chaos, to add to the to the danger to the general masses. Uh,
No, but to your point on him snapping, he would snap momentarily out of emotion, but we're getting an internal fervor here. Now, whether the battle could have created a long-term version of that, I don't know, but his thoughts on wringing, putting his hands around Perrin's neck and squeezing and feeling the bones crack.
well, that
He's
that
he
that's
he's a
where I
he's a
think
warrior.
that's part of how this reads differently to me and why I think this is more Sanderson, this scene, because since Sanderson is trying to partly mimic Jordan's style, but still he has to write in his own way, I feel like where when he fails, it's because he becomes a caricature of Jordan.
Mm,
So he takes something Jordan would have done or did do in the notes or in an incomplete scene, and then he takes it too far. We'll see that with the Matt scenes. That's where Matt doesn't work, is because it takes the Mattness, the fun bits about Matt, and it goes overboard with him until it becomes a parody. And that's kind of what's happening here. Is it's the all the exclamation points. You know, that boy, that tool had failed. Rom was dead. The prophet's been confirmed. Tragedy. Uh, no, no, Aram, dark friend. You know, it takes the fervor. I could see how he would snap. We have seen it before. You know, where he's cold and unsettling and kind of scary, like in Gehenna when Nynaeve goes to first meet him and he's kind of creepy and unsettling and this guy's not right. But then when they go back after the fecal matter has hit the rotating blades, he's raving. She can't get a word in edgewise, and she realizes, okay, he's no help because he's gone off the deep end here. Um, and he's basically leading a giant riot that leads into a kind of running battle. So so we have seen it, but I do think Sanderson takes it too far here in the craziness, or in the raving part of the madness. But I do like that one, he refers to himself as the prophet. That's who he is now,
mhm.
which makes sense that Masuma is dead. He has said as much in the past, is that person is no longer. I am nothing. I am only the prophet of the Lord Dragon, blessed be his name. Um, and also the in his head we see, oh, someone either he really is truly nuts and he's seeing things, or more likely because of the way the world works, someone's been messing with his mind.
Mhm.
Um, I
Yeah,
like that we
and
get that.
the thing is, you wouldn't even need compulsion here. You're just
Yeah,
nudging. And
That's
like I
true.
said, if you got someone who's got access to dark friends, he makes his first proclamation in the first village, and 10 people go, "Yeah, you're right," and then it just builds from there
Hmm.
because they were the ones that kind of got it. And five dark friends say, "Yes, you're right," and then five regular people are like, "Well, maybe he is right because these other people that I've lived with my entire life are saying he's right," and you kind of get
Uh-huh.
that bulldozing effect or that snowballing effect there.
Um, Now he does come down from his raving high when he gets ambushed. And I do like that part. That part is done well. So this is the middle of page 47. Um, it's my fault, the prophet whispered as the last of his followers died. It had taken several arrows to stop some of them. That made him proud. Slowly he forced himself back to his feet, hand to his shoulder where the shaft sprouted. Blah 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 blah. I do like that the raving does stop, and you do see he genuinely feels for his followers.
Hmm.
These are his people, or more to the point, they are the dragon's people, and I have failed them and failed the dragon. So I do like that he comes down from the raving.
Well, and
I
he's also
also,
in shock.
yes.
And the whole your life flashes before your eyes. A lot of
Hmm.
times there is
Hmm.
that in shock, you get that point of self-reflection where you're no
Yes.
longer feeling the pain, but your mind is going a million miles an hour.
And the ending here is, um the Fail's part of it is expected because she's said and done this before, which is he's just hearing them talking as he's dying of, sometimes a wife must do what her husband cannot. It is a dark thing we did this day, but necessary. Let no one speak of it to my husband. He must never know. Which is going to cause problems here in a little bit. We kind of teased it last time when we were talking about where Perrin and Fail end up. But then it's genuinely poignant. His death scene is genuinely poignant in its, it's not the epic sadness of uh brain fart. Why am I forgetting his name? Ingtar.
Hmm.
Ingtar and the owl. It's not as epically poignant as that when he, confesses and then chooses his place to hopefully make a redemptive sacrifice. I don't even remember how he died in the series. I just know it was stupid. Um, oh, because they were trying to do the same thing, but then it didn't do anything. Yeah,
Yeah,
people
because
are
they just show him
morons.
go off into the yeah, and no, yeah, and the
Yeah,
fact that
because they stand there and watch him get
yeah,
killed.
and
So it's
they
like
don't get
you're supposed
away.
to be
Yeah,
running away, you
yeah, yeah.
idiots. Yeah. But Masuma, that had been his name. He'd earned his sword on his 15th birthday. His father had been so proud. It's over then, he thought, unable to keep his eyes open. He closed them, falling as if through an endless void. Did I do well, father, or did I fail? There was there was no answer, and he joined the void, tumbling into an endless sea of blackness. Yeesh.
Yep.
That's
Guess he doesn't become a
sad.
hero for the horn.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But it's if you add the supernatural effect of someone showing up to him like a forsaken wood and maybe even a threat of compulsion in the beginning, and
Yeah.
that happening after the earth cracked and what happened in the great hunt, the
But
wolves came down to fight,
mhm.
and the
From what we see of him at the end of that, when he's talking to Per, why did the Lord Dragon forsake us? Why has he abandoned us? It would not have taken much compulsion, if any.
no.
He was already there. Yeah, it would have. I think it would have been more planting seeds of what he was to do with what he was already going to do.
Mhm.
Of kind of sowing some of that chaos.
The only incongruency there is his hatred for Perrin because the wolves saved them that night.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. That's where I think the compulsion may have come into it, of turning him into an enemy, of specifically Perrin, so that they could get Masuma to kill Perrin, to get rid of him.
Mm.
Whoever was trying to get rid of Perrin here. Of that to me, that makes the most sense of where the compulsion would have come in, is turning Perrin into a target
Mhm.
and convincing Masuma that Perrin was a dark friend.
Yeah, it just would have been more convincing if it was more of a situation like we get with Child Buyer, where the wolves actually attacked them. And so he attached that as a dark friend trait, the wolves being around in Perrin,
Hmm.
where we get the wolves actually saved Massima that night and the whole crew. But yet now he's attaching Dark Friend to Perrin because he's got the golden eyes and speaks to the wolves. So
Hmm.
it's a little bit off there. All right, spoilers. Spoilers. If you have are reading through for the first time, please leave.
Yeah. Um, just the prologue there, but internet issues and got
Well, I
stuff
mean,
to
we've
do.
also
So
gone an hour and a half. I mean, but
yeah.
our pattern has been the prologue and the end always take the longest, and
Hmm.
we can usually power through because the other stuff is there's a flow to it, and it's usually several chapters at a time.
And I kind of suspect that um we're going to have even more so here going forward with our um with our kind of meanderings and suppositions and talk about Sanderson and Sanderson versus Jordan and where did Sanderson come in and was this done well? Was this the way Jordan would have done it had he lived? You know, that kind of thing. I think we're going to have even more to say in that regards because of that. Because you know, a lot of what we were doing here with each individual little vignette in the prologue was how much of this was Jordan, how much of this was Sanderson.
Yeah, and what we'll see going forward with Sanderson's style is I can't remember if it's in this book, but I know it's definitely in the last book, where he'll do a lot of dual plot lines that are supposed to be
Hmm.
going along at the same time. And so you'll see character one, character two, character one, character two, character one, character two, till that thing resolves. And then we'll go to another duet as we go along. I know that happened a lot in the last book, but I can't remember if it happened in this one. Are we in the comments?
I was just pulling them up as I hadn't seen the thumbnail from Wednesday's episode. If Poland versus Mexico was broadcast on Netflix, okay.
Yeah, I was gonna change the reason I found out we had gotten the strike was I was like, you know what? I've got a better meme for that. And I went downstairs and pulled it up and it was, oh, your channel has a strike. Oh. So if you're seeing this, I successfully appealed to the strike. The YouTube gods could not deny me. So
Take that.
take that. But you know what? They either for a strike, for a warning, okay, whatever. But for a strike, if it's something that's going to pull you down for a while, it needs to flag it and send it to a human because the appeal goes to a
Hmm.
human.
Hmm.
And what it was there was probably a combination of words in there that set off the algorithm and it automatically gave you a strike.
Hmm.
Instead of automatically giving you a strike to appeal, it should just flag it and send it to a human so they can
Yes.
review it.
Yes, there should be, you know, some kind of warning process before the ticket process.
Yeah, and you know, I'm okay with your, you know, the publication is delayed until somebody looks at it. That's fine. But to actually say you can't record another video for 7 days,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, that's the first part of the strike, and then the second strike is 2 weeks, and then the third strike is you're gone. But yeah, I mean, for something like that, it should go to a human, and it'd be fine if they just delayed the publication. It at least would give creators a chance to put a little, hey, we have a video being reviewed, so if you don't see us for a while, it's because we got a
Hmm.
strike. So that way they can keep
Hmm.
their
Hmm.
clients or their viewers informed.
Yeah, and they specifically set up so that you can't do that. In fact, people have gotten in trouble for putting up videos that say, "Hey, here's what's going on. We're appealing this."
Mhm.
Well, I mean, what do you expect me to do, especially for channels that have actual followings, you know? Anyway, all right, where do you want to start here with the comments, or do you want to start with the spoilers? Well, let's go to the
Well,
comments
yeah, let's go to the
since.
comments. So if you go in order, Perrin's arc really took a giant step back with all this. I guess Fael's abduction really messed him up. This is not the same Perrin that
Hmm.
he was becoming before her chapter. Which, yes, and it was Fael's abduction. That was the whole point. The problem is he had already been through so much.
Well, and the problem was as we started with a Crown of Swords when we first got into the slog here, it's not just that he's not the same person after her capture. That's to be expected for all the reasons that make obvious sense and that we've talked to. The problem was he wasn't the same parent before her capture. So much of the character work that had
Hmm.
been done in the first, you know, six and a bit books through the first part of A Crown of Swords was undone and reset in order to have this annoying, soap opera drama between Perrin and Fail and Barrelane. And,
Yeah,
you know,
realistically, the thing that ruins it all, everybody talks about Roland, as we have in depth. It's Berlane. That's the cog that makes it a slog,
mm,
because it caused that first part you're talking about. It caused the animosity with his own people. It just it drove him to the point with nobody likes being accused of something you didn't do. That's going to already throw you off, and it's yeah, her. We used the meme when we were talking about this earlier that I had. I think it was Will Smith crying, and it says, "When you realize after parents' whole family was killed and da 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 da, that Fail was the only thing he had left, and now she's gone, you would understand a little bit more." And it's like, yeah, that actually is true.
mhm.
But to your point, it should have been like a hunky dory marriage when she got abducted. It should have been we've
Yeah.
learned our lessons. Yeah, we have a little tiff here and there, but
Mhm.
we are what we set out to be.
Well, and I think you made this point at the beginning of a Crown of Swords, or middle of Crown of Swords, when this starts, that you could have kept just about everything else the same. All that needed to be changed, all that should have been changed based on what had just happened, was Fael's reaction to Berlane. It's not, she shouldn't still be blaming Perrin. They have worked this out. Not that she should just ignore it. No, she's still Fael. She's still going to be annoyed. She's still going to be pissed off. There's still going to be tension and conflict there between her and Barrelane. It's the shit rolling downhill and hitting Perrin in the face constantly.
Mhm.
That was the problem. That had she reacted differently, had she reacted like they had grown and progressed, which they had, so it's still going to cause problems. It's not going to cause the same problems,
Mhm.
right? So that's all that really needed to be changed. And then, it would actually, the slog would actually be growing, would be building on something, because now, to your point, Bearlane was the problem. She was the third wheel here before, and now that Fael has been captured, now those things that were annoying are becoming serious problems.
I think I know what he was going for there. I mean, there's kind of a mini story arc that a lot of us dread. Is It's the whole don't end on a bad note because you never know when you're going to see somebody again
Mm,
kind of idea.
mm-hmm.
Oh, I
Don't go to bed
hate
angry. Yeah.
someone gets in a car wreck and dies, and the last thing you said to them was, "I hate you." You know, and then you hear people talking about the regret of that. It's just, I think that's what he was going for there,
Yeah.
because they were fighting and then she disappeared, and that was supposed to add to his anger. But then I think the delivery of that was not.
Well, and I think it's because it wasn't a fight. It was the whole damn time.
Hmm.
If things had been pretty good, and then because that annoyance of Bear Lane eventually reaches a tipping point, which it's going to. So Bear Lane causing issues reaches a tipping point. Him and File have a conflict. They go at it, and then I've got to go deal with this crap. I can't deal with this right now. I've got to go deal with this Mossima crap. And so they part with that unresolved. You could still do that and not have the lead up to that be such a slog.
Hmm. All right. Well, we've talked that to death, so let's move on to the next one. Messina. I'm assuming he means Massima right there.
Yeah.
really needed to go. Parents should have done this 2 books ago. It's not the first time we've seen file. Okay, so we're actually we commented on this as if it happened in the last book when we were
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
but it didn't happen till this book. So,
Yeah. After we'd done recording, I went, wait, we skipped over the death of Masuma. Oh no, we talked about it. Oh wait, no, that happens in the prologue of the next book. Oops.
yep. So we get into it in more depth here, and we agree with you. Yes. Uh, I'm not going. I'm not among those moronic children that would dislike Roland for what happened. On the other hand, I didn't really care about him one way or the other. His character didn't have the importance to me as it seems to you. Yeah, no, the importance of the character isn't about how he impacted the story. The importance of the character is that the critics of the books really blow him up.
Yes.
And that's more to what we're commenting to. We're more commenting to the modern critics of the book. And then
And
and then we just had to bring up every instance of how they're wrong. So realistically, had that not been a thing in the media world right now, we
yeah.
probably would not have commented as much as we have.
Yeah.
So
Um,
okay, so the
now
next
this
comment's
is
still on
interesting to
Roland.
me.
Yeah, yeah.
And this ties in with what I was about to say of your on your last comment, which was that I kind of mentioned last time, and I think Roland, I think that whole storyline would have been less of a slog and would have been more impactful if Jordan would have taken away some of the Fail bits, cut those down, trimmed those down, and made some of that page time be the other women and how they were
Hmm.
dealing with it. Some of whom were betting Roland's pals in order to make their lives easier, in order to have, that security blanket. Um, that
Well,
would
and
have made that whole arc more impactful.
I also think Roland and that crew existed because of the arc I was talking about, what I think he was trying to do.
Hmm.
That don't end on a
Hmm.
fight, but yet Fail's in a place now where she's requiring protection and she ended on a fight.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
we're guys. We're all talking as guys, but I know a lot of women. I study women, and I can't say I feel the same things they do, but I pay attention. And that is something that would be impactful for a woman when
Hmm.
she's talking about the decision she makes or how she feels at the moment. And Fail was having trouble not having feelings, which was very apparent by the literature. So, and I think the having the animosity before she was kidnapped was a part of that.
And I think expanding that story away from just Fail and Roland
Which again
would,
would have been solved by our theories on the
yeah,
first part of the answer.
would have also affected Scott's comment here of you get a hint of this, but I think if we would have seen a little bit more from Roland's crew, not just him, that you get a little bit of this, especially when Roland, literally saves Fail from being raped. Um, that they don't know where they fit. They don't know who they are anymore because they became brotherless because they couldn't accept what Rand said at the Golden Bowl, and they couldn't accept that. So they abandoned Septon Society, or they abandoned Clan and went to, and went and formed their own group and joined the Shido because they couldn't accept Rand, right? But now they're seeing, well, the Shido aren't Aiel anymore. So where do we fit in? Who are
Hmm.
we? What are we?
Which is the only reason the Shido would take them on. So I think the brotherless, yeah, we're judging Roland and his compatriots for it, but realistically, if you see something super wrong and you're in a tribe, it might be more honorable to not be in that tribe.
Hmm.
And realistically, if we're talking about Aiel Way, they would have eventually become their own thing.
Hmm.
It would have been a 14th clan
So,
at some point over a period of time. But because the Shido took them in just to have numbers, that's actually the dishonor.
mhm.
So I think the point of the brotherless being part of this group was more a knock on the Shido than it was on the brotherless.
Be- because you can understand where the brotherless are coming from in the beginning. What to But to Scott's point, I think the kind of disconnect there and where that arc kind of falls flat is as you say, at some point they have to realize we either have to go back and accept what we couldn't accept, or we have to go on and do something different because what we're doing here isn't right either.
Hmm.
This isn't our way. This is not, this is so un-Aiel like, as Scott puts it, and
Yeah,
we just don't get that resolution.
and at some point in time, these things happened already, or you wouldn't have 13 different clans.
Mhm.
Because remember, they were all one at one point.
Yeah, it's true.
And yeah, so this is the normal human interaction, and it was just accelerated by the fact that
Hmm.
oh, two Kara Corns popped up at the same time, and oh my gosh, one of them put all our customs and traditions on its head. So it's understandable that somebody might that might leave because they think it's just completely wrong because they still believed the tradition. It's actually the Shido who are the dishonoring, and I think that was the point. I think, but it did get lost in the mix because we get so much about them being brotherless.
Yeah. Um, so last comment here, I think is a good illustration of what we've just been ranting about and the difference here. Uh, Elaine's arc is too long, a bit repetitive, although I found the politics somewhat interesting, but it was a mini slog. And I think the point you're making there is that it is a mini slog because at least something is happening. Insofar as something happening can't just be action. It can't just be, ooh, a thing happened. No, no. To be interesting and to stay engaging as a story, that something has to progress the story. For 2 or 3 books, Perrin feels like he's treading water. Elaine is really annoying, and she never develops as a character, which is infuriating and why she very quickly becomes a fan least favorite. But her arc is progressing. What she's doing is leading in incremental steps to her gaining the throne, which is where her arc ended in the last book. So it it starts off at a point when she first gets to Gamelin and first pledges to that she's going to attain the throne, and then stuff happens, stuff happens, stuff happens, and all of that stuff is leading to something. Perrin just feels like he's treading water for almost his whole arc, from the time he leaves Rand to I don't even know. He just feels like he's treading water for practically the whole second half of the series.
Which is funny because Matt is the opposite. He's perfectly happy trading water.
Hmm. But he keeps getting pushed along. Yeah, yeah. Um, so there is I think there is the difference in those arcs and why, because Perrin is annoying as a character because he regresses and then he doesn't re-advance, he doesn't regrow. Elaine never learns her lesson, never gets her comeuppance, but at least the plot is happening. So while she is annoying as a character, you're still getting something from the story. All right, what were our spoilery things? I know we had a few things to him and
Um,
haw about.
my main thing was on Demandred.
Hmm.
Uh, okay, so you talked about him being the head of an army,
Hmm.
and I think the great spoiler would have been something that I think a lot of us suspected would have been him having basically control of Rand's army in some way, shape, or form, which could take many forms. It could be that he was influencing Bashir, or he was doing something in that arena, or he could have been Tame. Remember, we're still supposed to be seeing parallels between him and Taim.
Hmm.
They always, every time they describe either one of them, they always bring up the hawk nose, the slightly shorter than Rand, the everything that parallels the two of them. And I think this was reading it again, we knew the ending that he wasn't him, but reading it for the first time, you were still along that line. So all of us rereaders, you almost lose that where you were supposed to be suspecting that Taim was Demandred.
Well, and because it makes a ton of sense with his
Mhm.
character. Why wouldn't he want to? This is this is Luz Theron's great creation, the Black Tower, rebuilding, reestablishing men as channelers, as an entity, not as, you know, rogue criminals trying to hide, trying to run from the authorities. And he completely corrupted that and made it his own.
And you
I
can
took this
construe
thing
what
from
he
you,
did.
Luz
Yeah,
Theron.
you can construe what he did as commanding a great army
Yeah,
because it really is. It's probably the greatest army in the land right now.
yeah. He's got hundreds of channelers who are either willingly or unwillingly bound to him,
Hmm.
and they are a doozy of a military force, as you know, as we saw at Dumai's Wells, as we saw in the Wilderness and Path of Daggers, and then as we're going to see in the last battle, they do a lot of damage.
But now clue that he's not Taim. You made a point that how it was very that Sanderson made a point that he was unconcerned with Semirage being questioned. If he was in cahoots with Masana and Semirage knew he was Taim, he would be very concerned. Masana's
Hmm.
concerned because Semirage could give up that she's rooted in the tower.
Hmm.
If he was rooted in the Black Tower, then he would be very concerned.
No, that's a good point. He's not concerned because he's somewhere where Rand can't touch him.
Hmm.
It would be too hard, too out of the way. He had no support. You know, he would have no way to get to Demandred, where Demandred is right now.
Yeah, and I know he wanted it to be the big reveal, but uh you could have had in the questioning with Simaraj that he was in a far off land and we would automatically think Shara.
Here is here is the odd bit to me though, and I don't know that we ever get any hints to along these lines of, remember back when we first see Grendel and Samael, I believe in Lord of Chaos, it may have been Fires of Heaven, where they have their first meeting that we see, and Grendel is trying to get Samael to look at Shara. Now, I had thought that was because she knew where Demandred was, and she was trying to point Samuel at Demandred to get Samuel to deal with Demandred for her, to take him out, or
Hmm.
at least get in his way. But then rereading this, I go, wait a minute, but she doesn't know where he is. So what was that all about? Was that just her accidentally turning Samuel to Demandred? Was that her just trying to, you know, point, point something interesting out to get Samuel to go do something over there and stay out of her way? Or did she actually want him to take a look at that? That in light of this scene, unless somebody made a boo boo here and put something in the notes, or forgot something from the notes, right?
Hmm.
And she actually wasn't supposed to be that clueless about Demandred, and someone just made a boo boo. Um, that confuses me, because if she didn't know where Demandred was, why was she doing that with Samael a
Hmm.
year ago?
Well, and this also leads to her being responsible for the Trollocs in Ibudar because remember her and Samael are the ones that sent the Shido there. The Trollocs could have been the insurance plan
Hmm,
for whatever they were doing there,
that's a good point.
which is what they kind of did because this army just defeated her Shido army, and then the Trollocs came out as the insurance plan to take care of them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that would be why she would still be responsible for it, but then the Trollocs are essentially acting on their own initiative, and she hasn't quite figured out yet what happened at Malden. So even if she was the one manipulating Massima, she might not know, because it's so soon after, she might not have known what happened, and she'd already put her backup plan in place. And so now the Trollocs are just running amok because that's what
Hmm.
Trollocs do. Um, Curious if anyone else has any thoughts about that seeming disparity between Grendel trying to point Samael at Shara, and yet now we're told she has no clue that that's where Demandred is. So why was she doing it?
Yeah, and I want to say that we probably, according to the plan, we're supposed to get a little bit more insight into Shara before the end. And Jordan was maybe waiting for the end to do that or closer to the end, but with 10
Mhm.
books in, we've got every land we could think of except for that.
And all we have gotten, we get a little bit when we're with the Aiel
Mhm.
in Shadow Rising and Fires of Heaven.
And
We
then
get a
and
little
then
bit
the
from them,
things Noel talks about.
and then we get a little bit from the things that Noel talks about.
Yeah.
And then we got that scene there with Grendel and Samael. So I think the Sea Folk may have mentioned a little bit, but that it's not just that we don't get very much information. It usually when he's dropping hints like that, like we were just talking about here with the order of the prologue, usually he's more strategic about where he places those hints. So that you see that it is a clue. It's just
Hmm.
not some random thing dropped somewhere. Now there are occasions where there's some random thing dropped somewhere that you realize, oh hey, wait a minute. But generally, if it's a clue, it's at the scene of it's at least near the scene of the crime, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's when we talk about what's a contrivance to keep things going versus what's something that is a good storyline. If you had set up clues, we would say that was the story we were building up to. Whereas when it just pops in at the end and it's out of nowhere,
Hmm, hmm.
it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, because there weren't enough Trollocs to go around, so we needed a whole new army.
And
It's all the people that died in the Winter's battle in Game of Thrones still being alive when we got to the last episode,
yeah,
you know?
wait, you're at the gates of the city and you still have a whole army. How did that happen?
Hmm.
I thought all those guys died. What's going on here?
Which is funny because you could have had that army that came in because you could have had the Thousand Sons come in because he's still in love with her, and then you could have had Jon Snow fight him, and it would have been an awesome last, sword fight, and you would have had an army that made sense, an awesome last sword fight, and but no, we had to ruin the last season.
Oh well.
So whatever
Um,
your face is that wrote the books, you can finally write that last book. I just gave you the ending.
um,
Yeah.
we can at
Do
least say that it's not a it's not a complete disappointment. It's just there are a lot of nits to pick at in the last three books.
Well, I don't think that
But
army
so
just
much
showing
of
up
that
out of
is the
nowhere is a
circumstances.
is a nit to pick at. I do
No,
think that
that is
I
a
think
bigger
that was
one.
a
Yeah.
major one. I think that was a major one.
It's one of the few major ones. Really,
Yeah.
it's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there are others,
Which
but
we've got
that
three
certainly
we've
is the
got
biggie.
three over 1,000 page books that maybe in the Jordan notes we were supposed to start getting culture from Shara and getting more clues.
Yeah.
We could have at least had like IO merchants or something starting talking about things that are going crazy over there. We something like that.
766 pages. That's a lot of pages for a hardcover.
Hmm.
And I think the other two books are slightly bigger. It we could have. I'm trying to think. Do we ever get a wind rising up in Shara? Because that's another place where he will drop hints.
No, we
Is the
never
very
do.
opening of the a wind rose in the, and you'll see things
Yeah,
as
the
the
fur
wind
the
blows
furthest
across
away
the
we get
world.
is Shanshan.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that would have been another place he could have dropped a little bit of a hint. Um, and I just wonder what the reveal was supposed to be. If he had had all the time that he wanted and planned it out and wrote it out the way he wanted to do it, where because we've talked before, one of the reasons Knife of Dreams is so good, I think, is because it was rushed. He really thought. I remember at the time, paying attention to the forums and Tor would post stuff, Harriet would post stuff, he would post stuff about health updates, and there was a lot of speculation on the part of Jordan and Harriet uh, and others that there was going to be one more book after Knife of Dreams, and that his he was there was optimism that his numbers were good enough that he was going to be able to finish the series, but he was having to rush things. Knife of Dreams was a little bit of a rush job. You can see that in how much stuff actually happens. Especially compared to Crossroads, it was all set up.
Hmm.
So
Well,
if he had had as much time as he wanted to do everything he wanted, what would the reveal have been?
well, and who knows? We don't know the notes. Nobody has the notes but Harriet and Sanderson. Maybe Demandred was Taim,
At
and
some point, maybe that changed. Yeah.
and Sanderson said this would be cooler.
Or Jordan changed his mind late and then
Yeah.
didn't have have the notes or have the time, to flesh it out.
Hmm.
Maybe he changed his mind late.
Well, you talked about Knife of Dreams being so good. This goes down to Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law is the task will expand to the time you have to do it. And so when time became short, all of a sudden he became hyper focused.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's something Peterson says. I think this is in his first book, his rules of put a timer on. If you're, he talks about this of kids who aren't good at homework, set a timer. I spend all night doing homework and I get distracted and I don't do it. Set a timer. You got 30 minutes. You got an hour to do this, and then that's it. And it'll make you work.
mhm.
All right. Well, that's enough rambling and meandering. Um, Stuff's gonna get dark next time because we start out with Rand. I don't remember how many Rand chapters we have before we switch, but yep, it's gonna start out kind of dark.
Yeah, it's going to be dark in our social episode next time too because they just put a natural gas export. What's the opposite of what we did to Russia, where we're not allowed to export it instead of get something in? Sanctions was what we did on Russia.
Usually, it's an export ban, is the term I've usually heard.
Yeah, so they're trying to cripple our economy here because we're not backing down, and 27 states have signed on to help us, and most of them are sending troops down our way. So
This
things
could
might
get
get
interesting.
interesting in the next week. Yeah. Since
Oh
24
boy.
hours, it got, well, how long since we posted that video? About 48 hours.
Yeah,
And it's already
yeah.
accelerated way past what we talked about. So,
I need a montage of every quantum leap. Oh boy,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's this year.
Yeah. We're not even out of January yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
goody, goody. All right. Well, we'll see y'all then, and maybe. Well, we'll have the conference championship game, so we'll have at least one non-terrible thing to talk about.
Well, unless the
Hopefully,
Chiefs win. I'm tired of Kansas City barbecue because not only did we do it so many times already, but Kansas City barbecue is actually my least favorite barbecue. I might get flamed for that, but it's so sweet. I
no,
like how we
yeah,
do it down here where it's more
yeah.
savory and delicious. But I was like, okay, well, I did dessert for New England one time when they had been so many times. What's the dessert of Kansas City? The worst thing you could have, of course, because it's Kansas City and we all hate them.
What?
It's lemon pie.
What?
You don't
Kansas
even
City?
grow lemons
What?
and you don't even grow lemons in
All
Kansas
right.
City, but it's lemon pie. So we're just gonna do the empty syringes or whatever. I don't know.
Limoncello shots. All right.
Or I'll do barbecue that's not Kansas City barbecue.
Yeah.
You know,
Let's do a brisket. All right. Well, we'll see what happens then. See y'all next time.
later.